90% of my fears just weren't going to come true. And that somehow, when I really believed that idea, that made these fears much more manageable. Wherever you're at right now, and if you're not happy with it, you are not stuck there. But sometimes the things that we're anxious about occur to us as being real, but really they're not real. They're made up in our head. And when you meditate, it's not about not having any thoughts. It's really about letting the thoughts come and then go.
Hey everyone, welcome to Flow Over Fear. So glad to have you here today. My guest has a really inspiring story of building himself back up from the bottom and rising to the top and helping others to succeed as well. His name is Rick Warner, and his journey began as a homeless man, addicted to drugs at the age of 20. But through the help of other people, he turned his life around and became committed to helping others find success. And today he is a highly respected real estate broker living in Petaluma, California. And he has built a reputation for providing exceptional service and expert guidance to his clients. But that's not where it ends, because Rick's true passion is personal development and helping others succeed. And his personal development coaching program, the Navigator program, teaches people how to avoid distractions and stay focused on their goals for greater success. Rick, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad to have you.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Every time I'm on a podcast and I hear my introduction, I kind of get a little bit excited about it myself, to be honest, because it is a little bit unbelievable. Even when I hear it, I do want to. I feel I got to put it in context a little bit. My story didn't begin at being homeless. My story began with a really pretty decent family. I was taught right from wrong. It was, lower middle class. We didn't have a lot of money, but I didn't start in that place of where I ended up when I was 20 years old. With my best efforts, I did end up living in a tool shed, which is kind of my next slight course correction. I feel like to say I was homeless that's not fair to the people who were actually homeless. Like, I actually had a roof over my head. It was a tool shed. I had a porta potty. I took showers at the YMCA. So maybe I was just short of homeless, but I didn't have a home like you would typically think, or certainly not where I live now. So
yeah. Well, just like there's always that higher peak we can strive for. We always look above us when we see something more that we want to become. I think there's always a lower bottom, right? Like there's always lower where we can go from. But might be a good place to start is let's talk a little bit about childhood and see. I'd love to hear kind of how you were raised. You say lower middle class family, but loving household, all that kind of stuff. What did that look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I was the oldest of three. I have twin sisters that were 4 years younger than me. My dad was a pastor. My mom was a school teacher. It was pretty regular. It was in the Central Valley, mostly a little bit in the Bay Area, in the Central Valley. And my memory kind of as I was growing up was, nothing, there was no tragic or anything like that. Nothing that you would go, oh, well, no wonder he ended up like that. There's nothing like that exists. I will say that there were kind of best efforts, intentions with my parents around their parenting and things like that ultimately did lead to an opportunity for me to change how I deal with some anxiety versus fear and stuff like that. But those are all things that I discovered as an adult, not as a blaming thing. Oh, my mom, this, that, or whatever, or my dad. More of a discovery of, oh, here, this existed, and I understand why it existed in our household, and it had an impact on how I receive and react to the world as an adult. And the idea of being able to go back and kind of undo some of that stuff has had a real tremendous impact on just me. I like to talk about life on life's terms, and I just, for whatever reason, was not equipped to deal with life and life terms. And so initially for me, it was turn to drugs and alcohol. That it wasn't a straight line, by the way. It wasn't like, gosh, life is really hard, I'm going to drink. It was more like I was 15, 16, drank a little bit, like, this is awesome. And then it ultimately became a solution for me, which is a whole another story. But growing up, going back to your original question, pretty good. Like, I think from anybody's standards, not quite leave it to Beaver, but just short of that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting to hear a lot of those things because you could find, especially when it comes to relating on the addiction standpoint. Coming from a background of alcoholism myself, you can always pick out the pieces you relate to. It's like, oh yeah, that thing, that fear or that anxiety that I didn't know I had, but that subtle like growth in the alcohol problem over time. What was it? Was it that did you have some? Because you mentioned fear versus anxiety, was there like kind of an anxiety that you didn't know about when you were a kid, or that you felt that you didn't
Yeah,
understand?
I think so. There was an environment that I felt like, for one reason or another, that the theme that I feel like I existed in was something around what's wrong with you. That's a conversation that I was having with myself. Now, where I got that, I don't really need to get into that, but it just, I feel like that was a theme that what's wrong with you kind of stuck with me, whether it was my struggles in school or my struggles a little bit later in terms of how I was reacting to things. I didn't, for whatever reason, that, sometimes people talk about, when they're handing out the handbook of life, I didn't get one. It seems like everybody else got one and I didn't.
Yeah,
And so with that, with under that, what's wrong with you kind of theme, it created a lot of anxiety for almost any circumstance that I created or that I was involved with. Right. And so that's the only thing I would kind of look back and go, oh, that might have existed. I have to be super clear. I was not present to this. It wasn't like, if you'd asked me when I was 10 or 12 or 18, do you have a theme that you kind of live by? I wouldn't have said that. And also, even as alcohol and drugs became a solution for me, again, not a conscious direct line like, oh, I'm feeling anxiety, I will do this. The lines were much more blurred than that. And really, until I actually stopped, I thought everything was great and I was doing great, and the world was, challenging, but dang it, sure, I'm living in a tool shed, but I got my own place, kind of thing. Like, it was just this weird Pollyannish, like, kind of non-reality world I was living in, so.
yeah, yeah. I mean that's it's yeah. I mean it's interesting you bring that perspective in because I know that's how I felt, and I've heard that a lot. Through other people who have struggled with addiction or anxiety, especially at our age. Where we didn't really talk about it a lot when we were younger, so we didn't open up about some of these things. So we just didn't
Right.
know. We didn't know
Well,
what
and
we were feeling. Yeah.
generationally, right? They weren't talking about it. I don't know how old you are. I'm 54, so I was born in 1969, and it was just a different society then. In many ways. And I'm not even saying it was bad, but certainly we were not brought up with some of the things that I think kids are brought up with now, with some awareness around mental health. Just in time, by the way, as the world becomes super even harder to navigate, I think, with social media and the availability of just information that you and I didn't have to like figure out. How do we, the things that our kids are exposed to? I can't even imagine what impact that would have had on me. But at the same time, we didn't have anybody talking about mental health too much either.
Yeah, it's so true. And do you have any advice for like if you were to go back to your own self back at that age, 15 or so, or if you had some advice for a 15-year-old now who may be facing that or not know, what would you say?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that stuck with me early on, and as I started to do some personal development work, was this idea that 90% of my fears just weren't going to come true. And that somehow, when I really believed that idea, that made these fears much more manageable. In other words, if I'm sitting there and being afraid of whatever the next thing is, talking to a girl, how are my grades going to go? Do I have to get a job when I'm 18? How am I going to live in this world? Whatever it is. What maybe something going on at school. Maybe I'm in at odds with somebody. If I can look at this where 90% of whatever this is going on in my head is actually just never going to come to fruition, and I feel like that math is played out for me. I don't even know if it's 90%. It's probably like 95% of the things that I'm afraid of don't come true. That to me would have made it more manageable. And it certainly did make it manageable for me in my early 20s when I really started to get that concept. And then the other thing would be separating fear from anxiety. And I don't know if this is clinically accurate. So I'm not qualified to say this, but from a standpoint of what works for me in terms of dealing with fear versus anxiety. Fear for me is when I'm actually in imminent danger of some kind of physical harm, right? I I go for a run and there's a dog that comes to bite my leg. That's actual fear, right? That kind of reptilian thing that we have our brain with our, the amygdala part of our brain that's designed to be constantly looking for threats. And then, as I'm sure some of your other guests have talked about, as we have developed, we don't have the same number of threats that we've had as humans, but our brain still reacts to all the world as if we're about to be bit by this ferocious dog, when in reality, it's I'm afraid to talk to that person, or I'm afraid of what might happen if I don't make enough money, or you know what I mean, which isn't fear, that is anxiety. And the reason I make to make the distinction is that there's no reason to recover from or lessen being afraid. Like being afraid of something in that sense is a good idea. I should be afraid when a dog is coming at me, because then I need to run really fast or do something with the dog or make friends with it, or whatever. That's a good reason to have fear, right? But being afraid of like not having enough money or how to talk to somebody, those are things that I can learn how to kind of undo those things. And that gives me hope for not being stuck, which is kind of my big theme for everybody, is wherever you're at right now. Um and if you're not happy with it, you are not stuck there.
Hmm.
And so anyway, I just feel like I'm talking way too much.
No,
Maybe
no,
I've
no.
had too
This
much
is
coffee.
that's great. I want to let you go because I love that theme of fear versus anxiety, because it's something that I've tried to I love to dig into from the topic of conversation standpoint. That there's fears that are legitimate, that evolutionarily speaking we need to experience, because over time we needed to look around the corner and make sure that there's no saber-toothed tigers about to attack our families and stuff. That's danger fear. That's good. And then but the anxiety piece that's taken a larger role in the last 150 years or so, because so much more stimulus is coming in. And I think I like how you're touching on it there with that anxiety piece being a part of that, and your solutions to that. And so I definitely don't want to stop you on it.
Well, it provides so much relief, you
Yeah.
know, if you know that you're not stuck with this. So, and there's all these, we can get into the nuance of it, afraid of, being afraid of heights is a good one, where you could go, well, there's a crossover. I mean, it does make sense to be afraid if you're standing on the edge of a cliff and you actually might fall. That's something you should be afraid of and you should be careful of. But if you're standing in a building that is 300 stories high and is that even a thing? Do they have 300 stories? That's probably not even a thing. But anyway, a really tall building and you're
It
looking
feels like it
down
sometimes, for sure.
and you're right. And it might feel that way to the front, but
Yeah.
that's anxiety. That's actually
Yeah.
not real. Right. And so,
Yeah.
but sometimes the things that we're anxious about occur to us as being real, but really they're not real. They're made up in our head. And so again, what's great about that is that means we can then theoretically undo that they don't have to present themselves as this kind of paralyzing thing, because when you're in that place of anxiety, then you're not really capable of being effective in helping other people, or being or just being effective in general, whatever that is. For me, I focus on what's really important to me is to be able to be helpful to other people. If I'm stuck in my own anxiety about whatever it is, I greatly diminish or maybe eliminate my ability to be helpful to somebody else. And so I have this mandate inside of me to not let anxiety run my life. I had some anxiety a few years ago, 2019-ish, where it looked like my income was, the pipeline wasn't great. And I'm like, ooh, I was really concerned about it. And I did a lot of work around just talking it out. Like, okay, what are like, let's say that the worst thing happens. Let's play it all the way out. You don't make any money. What are you going to do? Well, I might have to sell my house. All right. What would happen if you had to sell your house? Well, I played it all the way out, and that was fine. And that was helpful. And that's what I mean is there's things that you can do to kind of lessen the anxiety. One of those things is 90% of your fears don't come true. I didn't have to sell my house, by the way. But the other part is I can make a decision, for example, to not let my external circumstances dictate my internal happiness. Like that could be a mantra that I have. And I can really start to build that internal muscle of like, yeah, you know what? I'm not, because my life is going to go up and down. my circumstances are going to change. People are going to come and go from my life. Finances are going to come and go from my life. And if I'm going to let all of those external circumstances dictate how I feel, then I'm going to be riding an emotional roller coaster. Or I could have the internal, mechanism of meditation and whatever, all of the personal development things that I can apply to the outside world, and then not ride the roller coaster as much. It's not that it's not a roller coaster, it's just not as exciting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I'm interested in this concept of feeling stuck as kind of that pain point of being in anxiety, because I always try to look for the root cause of some of the pain that we're in, like, feeling, and I feel like feeling stuck is always a result of that root cause, that root fear of uncertainty. Like, you're uncertain about a future, so you don't make the decisions to move yourself forward. So you end up feeling like you're stuck and you don't have that conviction. Is that kind of, talk to me a little bit about feeling
Yeah.
stuck and what you'd go
Yeah,
do there?
totally. Well, so the first thing I think I should say in terms of telling of myself is that I the very first thing I think of is, oh my gosh, it's always going to be this way, right? Whatever the circumstances are. It's surprising, disappointing, shocking that is, even though I've been doing this for a long time, that's my first default, right? That is probably part of that amygdala protective mechanism. And one of the things I like to remind myself is that my brain, left to its own devices, kind of put in neutral, is really designed to survive, right? So that's what the amygdala's job is. Like, nope, hey, that's a risk, don't do it. And surviving, there's no growth in that. Surviving is, oh, that's dangerous. We got to protect ourselves. If you live there, your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's where the stuck comes from. The cool thing is that our brain is so powerful. Everybody's brain is all powerful, amazing. And if you combine it with some spiritual connection, which is what I do, I mean, it's amazing what you can perform. And that very same brain that's out there, that is kind of causing some problems, can be the source of thriving, which is being purposeful about how you go about looking at life. So, but the great thing about being stuck, if you're really in a lot of pain around being stuck, is that also can be the thing that motivates you to go to the next level, to have that big breakthrough, to do something totally different. And so I've had a whole bunch of mini versions of that, but I've had two big ones. One was when I was living in the tool shed. I was 20 years old. And it was from that moment of clarity where I was like, oh my gosh, how did I end up here? Like, what's going on? And then that was enough pain for me to connect with some people that helped me out, that I was able to connect with them and learn how to live a completely different life that was drug and alcohol free, that I've now done for, a long time since that day. Then I had another time. So 20 years into that journey, having made some success, I bought $1 million house. I was married. I had 3 kids on purpose, because I had one kid when I was 19, not on purpose. That's why I guess that's out of context. That I also was out of money. I couldn't pay my bills. The real estate market crashed, and here I am again, like almost exactly 20 years later on my 40th birthday, completely stuck and afraid and worried. And it was from that pain, that emotional pain, that I learned how to go to the next level in the real estate world, in the business that I happen to be in. And then from there, I was able to really help a lot of people. So not only is I'm really excited for you if you're stuck, I mean, if you're really, really stuck and not willing, but it could be greatness ahead of you as a result of being stuck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense, because I hear that a lot from people that are on the show, who will say that where they're at when they're in that situation where they're feeling stuck, or that's often the jumping off point. And when you see those two that fork in the road, where you can either maintain that victim mentality and stay in that victim role, or you can go forward and try to break through. That's the choice that we can make. Yeah. So I love that. And so when you were breaking through that whole move from being in the tool shed, I imagine you got there just because of drugs and alcohol that kind of led you to living in that point. What was the point where you said enough is enough, and what was the change that you made to kind of move yourself in the right direction?
Yeah. So I just mentioned a moment of clarity. I mean, that's what's described in the people that I went ultimately to go get help from in a 12-step program. But, up prior to that moment, like I said, I kind of thought things were going pretty good. And the moment of clarity was like all of a sudden I could see it for the way everybody else saw it versus the version I was kind of telling myself. And that was really a bummer. It was really terrifying, actually, where I realized, like, oh, not only is it not great, but it's likely that this is going to be my life, that really nothing's going to change. And then I'm going to, that particular night, it was November 17th, 1989, where I was terrified. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I hadn't slept in 3 days. I was really paranoid. I was sure they were coming to get me. I mean, I was really in bad shape. And usually I could just put more something in me. In this case, it was Old Crow from my friend's parents' liquor cabinet, and that would do something. And it didn't do anything. And so I was just left with this raw feeling of total fear and anxiety. And I really thought I might die. And dang it, I'm probably going to wake up and do this again tomorrow because this is what my life is. Right. And so that's what happened. And then I said in that moment, God help me. I didn't believe in God. I wasn't religious, even though, despite my dad being a pastor. But I said, God help me, because I was that desperate. And then the very next day, I did go to a 12-step program. And for me, there was these little tiny, amazing, and maybe not so tiny miracles that happened over and over and over again. Like every single of the days of those first days, that kind of connected me to the next person, to the next thought, to the next idea, that just kept me in there, kind of this grace period for me to start living a totally, different life. And so I have to absolutely say that ultimately, as I look back, for me, it was this spiritual connection awakening. It was something that I personally probably was not going to just do this on my own. And I say probably only because I don't know why I just said probably. I wasn't going to do it on my own, to be honest. I really needed the help of other people, and I needed some kind of spiritual thing.
Yeah.
And that's really what happened. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many things I can connect with on that, because there's a book I'm reading now called Spiritual Emergency. It was written a while ago, but it talks a lot about that idea that these transformations, or these spiritual transformations, happen at kind of these points in our life where we feel like we're crazy, or feel like, just everything's just falling apart. But I mean, it's one of those things where, like, if if you've been through it, the power of that community that can help you, and that you can't make it on your own. And I mean, I shouted at the rooftops that community is the path to healing and the path to personal growth.
100% collaboration, community, the identification of, like they say, survivors of the same shipwreck, right? And our shipwreck is maybe different than other listeners, but there are survivors of your shipwreck, whatever it is that you're having a hard time with. There's people that have been there already, and they're not there anymore, and they're totally willing to help you.
Yeah. And so that sobriety point in your life, where you turned into the community of sobriety, 12 steps, and that was kind of that first foray into personal development.
Correct.
In a way.
Yeah, that's right.
So what was when you got sober, where did you start to connect more with the personal development that was going to, like, lead you to that next level in your life?
Well, it's fun, you used, or maybe I did, maybe we both used the word transform. And I think that's just so appropriate, because if you met me when I was 18 or 19, and then you met me when I was 22 or something, you would say, wait, this is not the same person. And so there was a transformation that happened in the process of, doing the steps and me taking that action. And so it was the first time where I felt like I had any real success of doing something that was effective and led me to, kind of being and showing up as a different person, having self-esteem and feeling like I have value. Even better side benefit was, even though I had this really not so proud moment of being where I was even able to take that and be helpful to somebody else with it, which made it was like bonus, right? But the idea of transformation meant that any kind of transformation can happen for anybody for any reason. That we're not, this is again going back to the stuck idea. And so, so first it was the 12 steps, but then it was, other things. It was being coached in real estate. I'm not stuck with who I am as a business person and some, the things that made me struggle with, say, reaching out to people and asking for help for business. I was like, oh, I can't do that. No, that even the idea of I can't do that is its own, it's a story, right? It's something that maybe I believe about myself, but it's actually potentially not true, because all I need to do is transform around that particular thing. So I really think there can be transformation everywhere. And then as I started reading more books and being more opened up to, like, the four agreements for me was a big, I know that's one of your questions about what's I've read lots and lots and there's so many good ones. I hate to narrow it down, but the four agreements really opened my eyes up to a different way to be able for the world to hit me, because I still, even 20 years sober, 25 years sober, whatever, I was still taking things personally, and I was still being impacted so much by the outside world. And so that started a whole nother conversation. I did a bunch of work and continue to do a bunch of work in Landmark, which has just really also transformed me. So there's so many opportunities to continue to change, no matter how long you've been doing it. I hope that I hope that you never arrive wherever that is, right? I like, one of my catchphrases for myself is, I've come a long way and I have a long way to go, and that's where I want to be. I want to live in knowing that, hey, I've done a lot. I'm not the same guy I was. And you've not arrived anywhere, Rick. You still have a lot of work to do. And that puts me right in the right place of, like, the right amount of, self-esteem, where I can show up and feel proud and be good, or good isn't the right word, but whatever. And then also not be like, hey, I'm kind of a big deal, so I don't need to learn anything from you, kind of thing. So I want to be right in the middle, right?
Hey everyone, I interrupt this program to introduce you to a powerful tool that will help you gain clarity on your vision and accelerate your growth and achievement. If you're listening to this show, it is likely that you have an exciting vision for your life. But the problem is that we often get caught up in the day-to-day. We get distracted, we face uncertainty, overwhelm, and self-doubt. And as a result, the gap between where you are and where you want to be seems insurmountable. And that's why I created a framework for how you can turn your vision into strategic, disciplined action that will accelerate your results in the next 90 days. I call it the Vision Reflection Retreat. It is a 2-day solo excursion designed to reignite passion and adventure into your busy life and realign your focus toward your why. This is the very same framework that I use every 90 days to reflect on my own life and my vision and set my goals for the next quarter. And it has been a game changer. And the good news is that I'm giving away this Vision Reflection Retreat guidebook for free when you sign up for my newsletter. Simply go to flowoverfear.com/retreat and download your free guide and enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I love that perspective on you're not necessarily content with where you're at and you want to be more, but you also want to be completely grateful of the where you're at now. If you can find that balance, that's huge. And you mentioned Landmark. I know a few other guys through other masterminds that have been a part of that. They speak very highly of it. Is that one of the first programs you did, or when did you get into that?
No, it's the most recent programs
Oh,
that
really?
I've done,
Okay.
actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, again, there's no way to say within a few minutes of what that, or I'm going to give it a shot, but whatever I will say will be kind of limiting. But I'll tell you this: that my experience with my dad, for example, was I couldn't connect with him. That I just, no matter what I tried, I couldn't connect with him, and I was convinced that he needed to do some work, right? If he just did some therapy, if he did, well, he's 79, he's not going to do anything, and why would he? And it's, like, it wasn't going to happen. So I became kind of resigned to, my dad's a great guy, because he really is. He's really helped lots and lots of people. Everybody loves him. I just don't get to participate in that. He was emotionally not available for me. That was the story that I had. And I did this work, through the Landmark Forum, that really just completely changed my view of how I had been showing up in our relationship. So much, though, that I literally left this event on a break and went around the corner on Battery Street in San Francisco, called my dad and said, "Oh my gosh, Dad, I just have realized how I have been showing up is with this story of this 12-year-old boy who, when they got a divorce, basically, when I said, who do I get to live with? He said, your mom. And that devastated me. And I was, of course, as a 12-year-old boy, he was my hero. I wanted to be with him. I didn't want to be with my mom and my two little sisters. And what I heard was, I don't really love you that much. And this is my hero. And so then I spent all this time reproving that story of he doesn't love me, he doesn't love me, he doesn't care about me. And in reality, of course he loved me. It was, and as I got older and more mature, my story didn't. And so I'm over explaining this, but the bottom line is that I was completely released from this thing that my dad doesn't care about me. And so by the time I was calling him, it was all gone. There was nothing for him to clean up. There was nothing for me to clean up. It was just, we can go forward. And then since that day, my relationship with my dad is 100% different. And I got the dad that I always wanted in a matter of days with no therapy. And it was entirely the work that I needed to do, not him.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, yeah, it almost goes back to, and I tie a lot of the personal development stuff around, the 12-step programs, because there's so much in that too. It's just cleaning up your side of the street, right? And so there's so much power in that idea of just letting, not holding on to that resentment, and maybe even figuring out that you actually have a resentment.
Totally.
And then just being able to clean it up for yourself. There's a lot of power in that.
What's funny too is that, yeah, I mean, of course, I had made amends to my dad and my stepmom and everybody else, but it was in a certain context, as like it only allowed me, at least in that case, to go so far. In other words, I'm like, wait, my side of the street's clean, Dad. Hey, what about it? And hey, I'm 30 years sober. Hey, he's like, yeah, how about Kaepernick? I heard he might play football again. I'm like, what? Why are you? I've just told you I was 30 years sober. Like, that's the kind of disconnection we had. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He just was cocooned in this, like, I cannot talk to Rick about anything because it doesn't seem like he can be happy, or whatever. And so it was the foundation for me, absolutely, was the steps in everything that I do. And then that allowed me to be open to all these other things.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, and it's a powerful story for how we can reconnect with people that maybe we feel disconnected from. Is really first looking at, like, well, where and it's as hard as it is, where personally am I, do I need to fix something? And
100%.
start there.
Exactly. If I'm reacting to somebody in a certain way, what I really believe today is that's on me. Like, whatever they're doing, it's the story that I'm bringing in and how I'm reacting to that. I'm responsible for that. I'm responsible for that emotion. And and I have the opportunity to go, oh, shoot, I wonder why it is that when somebody says this, that I react this way, because it isn't them. They don't have that much power, right? I'm giving them that power.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So that gets a lot to, like, how we individually take things kind of personally a lot of times. Like, it's hard not to, like, get hit by something somebody says or does, and it may be unintentional, like the case with your father, but you take it personally, you hold it in. So how can we avoid taking things so personally, like on that front, and move forward without holding that resentment?
Well, this is such a great, again, topic, because I had no idea 5 years ago. I remember I had a girlfriend at the time, and she's like, you take things so personally. I'm like, yeah, because you're being mean, or you're attacking me, or you're whatever. Like, I'm like, yeah, you were being personal, or whatever. And so again, going back to the 4 agreements, and there's a whole, that's one of the 4 agreements, is don't take things personally. Well, I was told that my whole life, but give me the avenue as to how do you do that? And so, having an understanding of what is going on for me that I'm taking something personally, kind of what we just alluded to. And also there's this part of whatever's going on for that person in that moment, in terms of whatever it is that they're saying. It's almost egotistical for me to take whatever they're saying personally. In other words, I have no idea how their life is led up to that moment that we're at the grocery store and somebody snaps at me because whatever, right? It could have been something that day. It could have been something in their personal life in general where they're not, or it could have been something that happened when they were a kid. But the idea of somebody saying something to me that I should be like, wow, I really better take that to heart. It doesn't mean, by the way, I'm not accountable and responsible. That's different. But taking something emotionally personal is my responsibility. So the next thing is to go, gosh, I wonder why when that person said that really hit me, that cut so deep, and be internally curious about myself and then finding out where are the places that I can really explore why that particular thing. Like if I go back to what we talked about at the beginning, that I have a tendency to hear what's wrong with you. So whether it's one of my clients or it's one of my friends or it's my girlfriend or it's my parents or it's my kids, if they come out with anything sounds negative, my first thought is what's wrong with you, and then I react from that place of really kind of a child, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's my job to go back and go, well, how come what's wrong with you is so sensitive, and what can be done about that?
Yeah. That's so, I like the idea of curiosity too.
Curiosity is the key to all the things, man.
Yeah.
I should have said more about curiosity, because that really is, I appreciate you highlighting that. That really is the source of a lot of good stuff, because when you're not curious, you're coming from a place of already knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a place of already knowing, there's really no possibility for anything different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, curiosity is like, it's an antidote to a lot of things, an antidote to, your anxiety, an antidote to, confusion, all of this stuff. I mean, it's amazing what a great quality question will do.
And even differences of opinion, right? I mean, in our society where we can be really divided, there's so much of a role that curiosity could play, right? And it's not for most of us, it's not a well flexed muscle.
No, it's not. Yeah, it definitely feels like that. That more people just want to kind of speak from statements rather than questions.
We want to be right, and we want to talk to people that agree with us. And if they don't agree with us, then we want to write them off. Which, by the way, I'm susceptible of all these things. I'm not acting as I've arrived at a place where I don't do that, but I'm at least aware of it, and I can work on it and be less that way.
Yeah, and that self-awareness is key. Is that something that you picked up through personal development too? Is just like at least being aware.
I would say that was really one of the tenets of the 12 steps, is that self-awareness. Like you said, what's your part in it? There's an opportunity within the steps to take your own inventory and look at how it is that you've been being, and really be honest with yourself about where is the source of all this, and doing some writing and asking some specific questions. And it was within that process, there's like these columns, and the fourth column, and it sounds like you've done some of this work, so you know what I'm talking about, but to the people who don't know, there's this kind of fourth column as you're writing across, like, this is the person I resent, and here's what they did, and here's what it affects. And then there's what's my part in it. And I literally left that column out when I did it the first time. And the guy that was helping me, we call him a sponsor, said, "Hey, what about your part in it?" I'm like, "My part in it? Look at this guy did to me, And he's like, aha, I kind of, I was 21, he was like 40 something. So he was like almost like a father figure to me. And he goes, I get it, but let's do a deeper dive into what part you may have, what responsibility you may have in this thing that you think is so horrible. And dang it, we went through each one of those names, and doggone it, I had a part in everything. And it was just like a totally mind-blowing moment, because up to that moment you had said, also that victim mentality. I was a victim until I got to look at, well, what is my part in it? And then it was so freeing. It was ironic. It was like, wait, so how is it that me seeing my part in it is freeing? But it was another version of the surrender, is another one. Being curious, surrendering is another one, which is super counterintuitive. But when you surrender to these ideas, all of a sudden, I'm the one that gets the freedom, right? Same thing with resentments. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's so, I appreciate that, because the 12 steps are so powerful. I mean, foundationally for me, and it sounds like it was true for you as well, they were such an important part about the personal development. They were like the foundational pieces, especially that fourth step.
100%.
Yeah.
I would not be who I am at all without having that experience. And I still participate in that. I still, help people there. It's not like, oh, I arrived and then I went. I feel like I have a responsibility, because there were people there. It's free, by the way. So there were people there that were helping me, spending time with me. I know now how much they were getting from that, but it's my responsibility then to carry that, to the next guy as well.
Yeah, it's an amazing. I mean, if you're going through anything, alcoholism, sex addiction, whatever addiction it may be, they have these programs, and they are. I mean, both Rick and I have been through them, and it's transformational if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to ask for help. I can't speak highly enough. And please go get that help. It's transformed our lives. It's transformed Rick's life, my life, and it was the starting point to something great.
And
Good.
but can I just say something?
Yeah,
You said
please.
something so important. Is it is all about the experience of doing the thing, whatever the thing is. So this is not learned, right? This is not read a book and then understanding better. Everything that I've talked about has been experiential. The insight follows the action. It's not prior to. And so that's why it's so important to have people ahead of you that have done it, that you like, or that you trust, or there's something about them that you go, hey, I want what that person has. That they can go, hey, I get it, but you're going to need to do the things that I did. And so because you and I have done those things, we've had that experience and we can talk about it. But, us talking about it is only us talking about it. It's not actually going to change anybody's life until they actually do something. And that applied, of course, in when I did the steps, but it applied when I got coaching on the real estate side, and it applied when I wanted to do personal development, and applied when I did Landmark. Going, listening, and talking about it is not the thing. It's doing the actions, like taking an inventory, like making amends, like looking at my experience with my dad and really being curious of what happened when I was a kid, and then being able to go, Dad, I really had this discovery and changing his life. By the way, he's like, I cannot tell you how pleased he is, because I feel like I got my dad back, but he feels like he got his son back. This is 40 years, unfortunately. Like, that's a bummer. But I don't even spend time regretting that. Like, it happened when it happened, and we're kind of basking in what we have right now versus, like, oh, I should have done this sooner. Even that's a total waste of time.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I mean, it's such a great perspective, and that idea of community, it transcends, just healing, but it moves into like your career, like you could just mention, getting into Landmark and real estate. How has that experience with, say, community, sobriety, all of that influenced how you built your business? Because you're very successful now in the real estate world, broker in one of the most prestigious areas of California and Petaluma, which is beautiful, by the way. How has that influenced your career?
I think that I'm not sure how much it's influenced me from a real estate broker standpoint, except for I bring certain principles to how I interact with people, right? So I'm very transparent, very honest. I'm not like a sales guy. I'm consultative and so forth like that. So I think that provides some attraction to the clients and how I do business. But I also have a coaching business where I coach agents, and that's where these same principles really, really apply, because we really like the idea of a community and collaboration and helping each other and taking our experience. And I have a partner as well where we take our experience and we go, hey, this is what we've done, and we're happy to share it with you. And then within our coaching, it's because it is all mostly formatted as groups. We're all having them help each other. So again, creating that kind of collaboration. And we literally coach, have a mentee. So if you don't have somebody that you are helping in your office or whatever, go find somebody, because it's really valuable. And how this is applied to you, maybe your listeners, is no matter who you are, there's somebody in your life that you have some experience that they don't, that you could help them. And when you have the opportunity to be accountable to somebody about your actions and sharing with them, it makes a difference. And so we're kind of reformulating this sponsor sponsee idea that I certainly was taught in AA, that's so powerful, is look for somebody who you can help, and look for somebody who can help you, and have both. Have a mentor, have a mentee. Like, live in that world where you're surrounded by collaboration and community with people that have more and less experience than you.
Yeah. And I think for people like you and I, it feels like, we've had the experience of finding a sponsor, for me, it was the frightening, pick up the 800-pound telephone and try to call somebody. But a lot of people may not have that experience of trying to find a mentor, find somebody, or feel like I don't want to bother them, or I'm embarrassed, or what have you. Do you have any recommendations for people on how they can get over that and try to just engage with that community anyway and get over the fear?
Well, actually, I'm sorry. I may have drifted off for a second. Are you talking about within the context of 12 step, or just in general reaching out to people?
Mainly in general, like whether it be a coaching experience or Yeah,
good. Okay. Thank you for, my ADD went somewhere else for a second there. So again, at least the formula has been for me, I need to be in a certain amount of pain. I wish that wasn't true. I wish that I could just be like, hey, there's a weakness I've identified myself, and now I'm going to go do something about it. Usually I have to have a certain amount of pain around it to be willing to go do some of these things that do seem unreasonable. But the other part is finding out, well, what is at the source of my anxiety, which is not actually a fear, right? None of the, like, if you were to go talk to somebody, your life is not in jeopardy. You're not in any physical jeopardy. So what is going on that creates that source that tells you you really shouldn't do this? This is going to be bad. Well, let's put this off. Let's do this some other, and really spending more time in that. But yeah, I think, and sometimes it's just a matter of, well, I get that I'm afraid, or what I call anxiety. I'm having anxiety. I'm just going to do it anyway. And just being kind of, determined to do that. One trick you can do, which is what my accountability program is, I find that if I'm left to my own devices to to do the things I say I'm going to do in the morning, that I kind of, maybe I run at 50 or 60%. Today I'm going to talk to 10 people. I'm going to meet with 2. I'm going to write some thank you cards and so forth. And then if I've not told anybody I'm going to do that, then the chances of me doing all those things is not great, to be honest. I don't know whether it's just I don't care that much about myself. I'm not sure what the source of that is, but that's the reality. So one of the things that we coach is tell somebody else what it is that you're going to do that day. And we have a whole format of it for us within the coaching, but the principle will work the same. So if your idea is, man, I really need to make sure I reach out to 2 people every day to learn more about anxiety or personal development, then have somebody, maybe one of your close friends, that you just text them in the morning, hey, I'm going to do this. And then when you're done, text them back, hey, I did the thing I said I was going to do. That's a really short version of getting you, because when somebody else is counting on me doing something, I'm much more reliable. For me to do it on myself, and I'm sure that maybe there's going to be a time in my life when I don't have to be that, but that's reality for me. But I've also found for a lot of people, it's very similar. So having an accountability partner can really, really make a difference when it comes to doing the things that you want to do, but you just don't do for whatever reason.
That's so great. Yeah, accountability partner. That's the second time it's come up in just as many weeks. So I think it's a great rule of thumb, and something we learned from that recovery focus. And speaking of focus, I know that's where a lot of your coaching is kind of geared towards, is like removing distractions. Can you talk about how distractions are kind of getting in the way of how we're really trying to get into what we need to do?
Well, I mean, it's so available to us. Everything is coming at us. Everybody wants our eyeballs, right? And they're really good at it. We are not trained as human beings to be to be ready to filter. And it kicks in the adrenaline and the endorphins and the dopamine. All of these things are pulling at us to, I mean, and for me too. So what I can't talk to is, oh, I've gotten rid of all the distractions. I haven't. What I've done, especially as an ADD person, is I've created systems that while I get distracted, I've got something to bring me back. For me, it's this thing called a daily navigator, which is a bigger version of what I just described. So it's not about not getting distracted, but it's about having this commitment to doing this list. And so it's kind of like meditation. When you meditate, it's not about not having any thoughts. That's not really a thing. But which I thought it was. It's really about letting the thoughts come and then go. And so for me, my distractions are, okay, I was distracted. Whoops, now I can go back. What is it that I was committing to do today? And let's go back to that. So maybe I will get to a point where I'm not distracted anymore. That's not where I'm at. Where I'm at is, I know I'm going to get distracted. So since that's the case, what are the tricks and trade? What's the hacks? What are the things I can do so that when that happens, I can still do the things I need to do? And so with this accountability, program that we have like basically a menu of things that people typically do. There's some personal development, there's some professional, but like on the personal development side, stuff that anybody and all listeners can do is, I meditate. I commit to meditating. I commit to doing some journaling. I commit to reading or listening to a podcast. Certain things that if I do on a regular basis, I know that the cumulative effect of that is going to be me having less anxiety, me having a better sense of how to react to life on life's terms, whatever it is. but I literally check the box and I sign it like a contract and I take a picture of it and I send it out to like 25 people and I go, hey guys, I'm committing to doing these things today, and they get done. I mean, like I run around 99% of getting the things done that I've checked the box saying that I was going to do. Because when it's all done, I take another picture of it, send it back out to the same group, and they go, hey, good job, or way to go, or whatever. And we're all doing the same thing. So there's this collaboration around basically not being distracted by distractions or our mood. That's the other thing we haven't talked about, but I can get distracted by my mood, right? Oh man, in the middle of the day, and dang it, this deal didn't go the right way, or my spouse said something that hurt my feelings, or my kids are in trouble, whatever it is. And all of a sudden I clear the day with all the actions that still need to be taken. And, we don't have to have that problem anymore either.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I like that idea. And it's all based in this, just these foundational principles of personal development, and community that we first talked about. And man, I'm really, this was such a great conversation. And I love talking to people who have been in recovery, because it seems like they just have this one level up on personal development. And I appreciate you being here, and I can't let you go before I ask you, because, I know, in the world of dadhood, we need to have dad jokes and all that kind of stuff. So do you have a good dad joke that we can end on today?
I do actually, because this is really, really important that people get that. I think that my employer must have picked me for my motivational skills, because everyone says they have to work twice as hard when I'm around. Now,
good job.
I feel like there was the appropriate delay for the laugh there, because the quality of a dad joke is by how not funny it is.
Absolutely. 100%.
And yeah. And so the fact that it made no sense, like you really had to think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And then you're like, yep, I get it. There's a dad joke in there.
Yeah. So I think that's a good way to career it on to the end. Sorry, that was just a bad, but that's what I love about dad jokes, is they help us. I think that they help us to connect, not with just our kids, but with each other. And so I really appreciate you playing along with that. And I appreciate you being here, Rick. Where can people find you and get in touch with you if they're interested in some coaching or in just hearing about you and what you're doing?
Yeah. So my Instagram is the Rick Warner. I have my coaching website is flowcademy.com. So you talk about, living in the flow. That's what we coach is. So FLOCADEMY. So like academy, but it's Flow Academy.
Okay. With no W.
But if you, we talked a lot about, recovery. I am always available to talk to anybody about recovery. And I'm just going to give you my phone number, which I know, it's weird on a podcast, but somebody can rewind it, but it's 415-302-6348. You can just text me and go, hey, I could use your help. I'm happy to talk to anybody wherever they are and point you in the right direction.
That's incredibly generous. And thank you for that. I mean, that's how we bring recovery out is by sharing it with each other. And I know that's part of the 12 steps. So thank you for continuing to push that forward. And thank you for your kindness and your wisdom that you shared with us today. This was a great conversation, and I wish you all the best, Rick. And to everyone else out there, if you really like this, if you got something from this, or you feel like there's someone that could get something more from this, please share it with someone. Please share it with them and keep this message moving out there. I'm grateful that you spent this time with us. Thank you, Rick, for being here. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Flow Over Fear. If you are liking this show, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll be first to know when I drop a new episode, including interviews or trainings or dad jokes. That's right, dad jokes. Add a little levity to your life. And if you liked this episode in particular and you think somebody can get something from it, please share it with a friend, and that way we'll spread the message together. Thanks again for joining me today. We'll see you next time.